1211, is it? 10507?
That is correct.
First of all, you have to really understand what you're moving, and in this instance we're moving the dry materials, or the dry that have been treated, so they're wet waterlogged wood. So they're fragile, but they've also been impregnated, so they're stronger than they were. But to enable them to move, they have to be packed correctly, which reduces any sort of vibration and damage, because damage always occurs in transportation. So in this instance, we try and sort of mitigate or limit the risk as much as possible. So there's quite a lot of us involved, and it's quite a complex little operation, which is organised from the start, from A to B, which is where we're going today.
The tapu register takes into account mihi a wairua, so that means like where the taonga were found. So if they were found in a graveyard or urupa, or they were found at a pā site, or if they were found at just different locations. It also takes into account, I like to call them like atua. So if it was something like a patu, that would be take on in the realm of taonga, or the god of war, or things that like ko, which are used in gardens, so a garden implement, or horticulture implements. Though the tapu of a horticulture implement wouldn't be the same as a tapu of something that was used in war, like a patu or a tefa or things like that. And so the rating is from 1 to 4, 1 being not tapu and 4 being of high tapu.
Penapena translates really to conservation or preservation of cultural material. If you look at the definition, it talks about nurturing, because really that's the focus, is to nurture and to care for taonga in a very particular way. They're not just seen as objects, they're seen as almost like children. And we want to protect their mauri and their mana as much as possible.
The taonga can't speak to you, so you've got to really do a little bit of research to, where was this taonga found, who has connections to these taonga, what type of taonga is it.
So when they're packed, spreadsheets are made of what the contents are, and they're packed in ethafoam, which is this archival foam with a Tyvek lining, and then there's a piece of foam put in the box so that when the lid goes on, they're quite secure in the box, and that absorbs some mechanical shock, but they need to be very carefully handled. Yeah, they're still very fragile, and they need to be in very tight environmental parameters for them to survive.
And of course everything has to be ticked off, so there's liability for the university and liability for the ministry. So we have 2 people ticking each box off. The 25 years that I've been working in this, I've seen the sort of movement and progress from institutions possessing, owning and interpreting taonga for Māori, but actually now I'm starting to see the development of whare taonga, and it's a really exciting thing where they can be engaged in the research, the revitalisation of mātauranga Māori, and actually the interpretation.
We sometimes have collections on loan from iwi or from other organisations where they've come to an arrangement where we're the safest place for the time being, and that time being can be 12 months, it can be 100 years, or anything in between. So being a custodian is a completely, I would argue it's actually one of the purposes that communities fund and create museums.
So we've got about 40 of these storage units, and what we've got today will fill about half of one of those, and that's just in here in what we call the small object storage, and that makes up about 1/3 of the total storage, because we've also got a lot of pallet racking and cantilever racking. So they'll be in quarantine for a couple of weeks, and then they'll move into our pest treatment facility, and that takes about 4 weeks for that process. So we're looking at about 6 weeks before we can bring them through into the store here. It's our standard practice, anything coming from outside the museum environment, we treat it as a pest risk, so we want to keep everything here safe. and so we quarantine them just in case there's any bugs in the boxes or have got on in transport. And then we put it through a pest treatment process. We use anoxic pest treatment, and that is anoxic meaning lack of oxygen. So we have a nitrogen generator that takes nitrogen from the air and excludes the oxygen, and we pump that nitrogen into a pest treatment chamber, and as we pump that in, it displaces all the air until there's no oxygen left, and that kills the bugs. It's all quite brand new. We've only been in here for a couple of years. It's all fully relined with insulation panel and all new heating ventilation equipment to maintain a really stable environment in here.
Because we have a presumption that our collections are here for a very long time, it's worth spending a bit of time and thought and money in creating a facility that's going to last well, but also really enhance the mana of the collection. So rather than being just putting things in a shed at the back of Beyond, we really wanted to give them, to elevate them to the status that they deserve. And you can really see it when visitors come here. There's a sense of wow when they walk in the door, and that changes the attitude. It means, oh, actually the museum must really care about these things, even though they're not on display or they're not at the main museum in the domain. There's love and care and attention being paid here, and I think that really helps with the overall mission.